Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation, Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home, and Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about what's happening on the local sports scene. New Orleans Saints, New Orleans Pelicans, the Tulane Green Wave, LSU Tigers. We'll also touch a little bit on what happened with the ULL Raging Cajuns as well. And to join us on our panel tonight is Lenny Vangilder of SportsNola.com and also Glenn Guilbeau of Gannet News. Guys, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us. And Lenny, your first time here. Thanks for joining us. Certainly appreciate it. And if you would, tell the folks a little bit about Sports NOLA and also what you're doing with WHNO TV.
Yeah, if you haven't visited our site before, we're 6 years old now and been in the marketplace since 2008, originally as part of NewOrleans.com, and since 2011 as SportsNola.com. Cover everything that's going on in the area with the real emphasis on high school sports, but we do cover everything that goes on. We're also affiliated with WHNO TV Channel 20, where we do an awful lot of high school sports and weekly show production there, where again, just run the gamut of what is going on in sports.
Yes, no doubt. Glenn Guilbeau, returning panelist for us. Glenn, welcome back. And if you would, tell the folks a little bit about what's happening at Gannet News, the website, and also doing some stuff for Channel 4 as well, right? Right.
Gannet is now partners with WWL-TV, so my stories about LSU and the Saints today and whatever I'm covering is on the WWL-TV website, and Gannet papers are Shreveport, Lafayette, Monroe, Alexandria, and then the Twitter is LSU Beat Tweet, and the website LSUbeat.com.
Sounds great. Guys, Saints are in the midst of OTAs minicamp this week. They wrap up OTAs next week. We were talking a little bit before the show. I think it's really difficult to be able to judge an NFL team when they're running around in shorts, T-shirts, and helmets. It's a contact game. But what minicamp is, what OTAs are in a lot of cases, getting yourself physically ready for the season, but also being able to take what you've learned in the classroom and to be able to take that to the playing field and to be able to, again, go out there and to be able to run those plays and to be able to absorb that and to be able to put it out on the field so that it becomes second nature for you. But with that said, let's first of all talk a little bit about the minicamp itself. Anything has stuck out to you guys? Injured guys have come back from injury. Anything at all that you can comment on? Lenny, we'll take you first.
Not necessarily. I think you hit the nail on the head. You don't know a lot because they are not wearing pads, and that's when you find out so much more. And we'll see that once training camp starts in West Virginia in a little over a month. But I think as much as anything else, this is about team bonding. This is about establishing how you're going to do things. On the field, off the field, finding out what you have in some of the new players, whether it was free agents or draft picks or rookie free agents, and you learn a little bit more about those guys before you get to West Virginia in 6 weeks' time.
Right.
Well, two things I've noticed that you usually don't see in a mini camp: the defense, they were doing a lot more blitzes and doing a lot of fancy stuff that you often don't see in a mini camp. And again, like you said, that's taking it from the classroom to the field and learning the plays, and it's a young defense. And also one thing that was interesting, Coach Payton said yesterday, it was the first time they piped in sound at a mini camp. So they're taking those road woes of last year a little more seriously than they said they were last season. I think they're looking at that as something they have to play under noise all the time. They definitely got rid of that hex when they wanted Philadelphia, and I think Seattle probably would have beat almost any team last year regardless of where it was being played. But they need to, sometimes they were harmed by the crowd noise at a place like Seattle, so they're taking that seriously, and they definitely have to play better on the road next season.
It was probably the first time I've ever seen this team kind of flustered in Seattle last year when it came to the crowd noise. They've been able to overcome that. They're usually in a place in the Dome where obviously they're being able to really kind of be in a position where that helps them. You know, they were a little bit rattled last year, and again,
especially
I guess
the first game.
No doubt
Seattle.
about that,
Yeah,
and I think that's probably one of the reasons why the coaches did that this past mini camp. I was a little bit surprised that it happened, but again, you know, probably again just trying to exercise some of those demons.
Absolutely, I think you learn from what you did wrong a year ago, and clearly, while this team did win on the road in the playoffs for the first time last year, this was a team that did not play well on the road over the course of the entire season. Like, you throw in the playoffs, they were 4-6 on the road last year. You know, they've been a team that's been tremendous at home, but you've got to be able to win games on the road. Now, the good news is, in terms of this year, the one thing that you might have to contend with, which you really didn't have to last year, could be the weather. And you don't know what that's going to be like. You're playing Pittsburgh on the road late in the year. You play Chicago on the road late in the year. Those are things you can't simulate, you know, short of putting the Superdome at 32 degrees and going in there and practicing, but you're not going to really be able to simulate those type of things. Noise you can, and you obviously going to go into some loud places again, but not necessarily the cold weather. That would be my biggest concern as you look ahead of the 2014 season.
Well, the best way to win on the road when noise is bothering you or whatever is to be able to run the ball. And I think we saw Peyton make a late season strategic shift with becoming more of a running team late last season, and that's why they beat Philadelphia. And I think you're going to see more of that, and you know, better running earlier in the season probably would have won some of those road games, finishing off games. So they're going to be better at that, I think.
Lenny, do you agree with that? Do you see a shift with this offense to again not having the run as maybe an afterthought, that it really becomes a part of the game plan and something that Peyton hasn't really done except for really the last part of last season, really kind of sticking with it?
Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I think you just look at the numbers, and you know, just the number of times that they've run the ball, say 30 times in a game. It wasn't very many, with the exception of games that were blowout kind of games. And certainly you look back to a season like 2009, they really ran the ball a lot.
Yeah,
and
that's the 2 years they ran the ball well.
Right.
Last year at the end in 2009.
Yeah, and I think you could even point a little bit to 2006 as well, Peyton's first year, but of course you had Deuce McAllister at that point. But, you know, this is clearly a team that's going to do it by committee in terms of running the football. Although, you know, last year was a little more of an emphasis late in the year with Kyrie Robinson and Mark Ingram. How he's going to use those, you've got Pierre Thomas, you know, back again. Is there somebody else that's going to step in there as well? Obviously, Darren Sproles is gone. You know, I think, though, based on the amount of success they have, and it does allow you to, you know, if you're concerned about defense at times, being able to shorten the game a little bit, being able to, you know, do that by running the football.
Yes. Guys, Jonathan Goodwin is signed. One of the reasons why we know now, the reason why they waited until after June 1st, so it would not affect compensatory picks. Saints, for the first time in a long time, are going to probably be in that mix for compensatory picks. They've lost more free agents than they've signed this past season. But with that, even with the rotation that we've seen between Lelito and Goodwin, when I look across the board on this line, it probably is still the biggest question mark to me on this team. Glenn, I'll go with you first. Do you see that? Do you think there's still a question mark going forward with maybe some aging guards who obviously have been Pro Bowlers? Obviously, you got Zach Strief, who's in the twilight of his career. You got a young Teron Armstead, and now you got a situation where you're trying to figure out who's going to be your center. Saints had some problems last year in protecting Drew Brees early in the season. They seem to be able to kind of get that together in the second half of the season, and also open up some holes for the running game. But the offensive line, to me, is still the biggest question mark on this team.
Well, I don't think it's as big a question mark as it was at this point last year, because they went into last season knowing that Charles Brown might not be able to do it. And they're better at left tackle now with Armstead, and I think they're better at center too with Goodwin over De La Puente, though Lelito is they kind of want him to win the job. But if he doesn't, I think Goodwin can be a solid center for you, better than De La Puente for maybe one more year. He's 35. But you know, the rest of the line is good. I think Armstead is the key, because I think that really hurt the Saints in critical times last year. And I just think overall, I mean, I wanted them to take a lineman early in the draft. earlier than they have been, and just to shore that up, because you can't just depend on Breeze all the time to do that anymore, because he's getting up there. I think you got to surround him with the best possible. I would put my money in the offensive line first and foremost.
I think that's a great point. Now, the one thing I think differently, just because one thing you haven't seen Peyton coach teams do a lot of is shuffle a lot on the line. And if you go into the year with 4 interior linemen, and that's what they've done a lot, Lolito is the one guy who can swing and play guard and center. So do you want to make him, if that's the case, do you want him to be the backup and have Goodwin be the starter? Because if something happens to one of your guards, now Lolito would have to slide out and play guard and then Goodwin play center. If you've got to do it in the middle of the game, for instance, now you're having to move 2 parts around instead of just one, and that might be concerning.
Yeah. Look, I think they've shored it up now with Goodwin coming in there, but, Goodwin didn't have the best of years last year with San Francisco. It's one of the reasons why he's not there. He's an aging player. It helps to have, obviously, 2 guys that at least have Pro Bowl capabilities, either side of them. A guy that he's played with in Jari Evans. Ben Grubbs he's never played with, but obviously they'll be able to mesh. I'm less worried about Teron Armstead. I thought he really grew the last half of the season. He's got the athletic ability. The only thing that I'm worried about is, again, defensive coordinators have had a chance to see him on film now, so that they're going to find his tendencies and they're going to try to exploit that going forward.
But it's 4 games worth. That was about it. I mean, basically we saw him, the last two and a half games of the regular season and then the playoffs. So it's not an awful lot of film that they have on him, and certainly the Saints self-scout as well. But you have to be impressed with what you saw, just that short time frame, and obviously he is a very athletic type of tackle. I mean, remember, we were talking, I guess, 15, 16 months ago when he was at the Combine, he opened eyes with his Combine workout, had a sensational 40 time, the fastest 40 time ever run by an offensive tackle. So, he's a guy who you certainly see promise there, and these guys have been unbelievable at capturing linemen in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round and turning them, or in Street's case, the 7th round, and turning them, into solid, if not Pro Bowl level players.
Yeah, there's some guys also on that line right now that ultimately they've been with this team for a couple years. They haven't made it obviously into the starting lineup. But this is kind of a big year for those guys on where they're going to be able to stick. Jarvis Byrd injured in the Pro Bowl last year, a back injury, had the disc surgery done a couple weeks ago. He aggravated supposedly during weightlifting. Peyton said it was asymptomatic, that they didn't have to do the surgery, but they were trying to clean this up before they went in the season. He will not be available to at least training camp. Glenn, is that a concern?
I think it may be, because a lot of people just have the feeling that he might be a little more hurt than they're saying. So we're going to have to wait and see in training camp just how far along he is, because that was one of the major acquisitions in the offseason along with Champ Bailey. So they definitely need him at 100%, at least by game 1 of the regular season.
I think anytime you start talking about a back, you have to be concerned. A minor back injury is still something, in my mind, that's got to be serious. It's the type of thing that can linger.
Yes.
And while, of course, they're going to tell you that, if this was the regular season, he might have been able to play this week and wouldn't have had to deal with surgery, and we're just being precautionary and all that kind of stuff. I think you have to be concerned anytime you start talking about a back, because it's the type of thing that could carry on and be problematic.
The position he plays as well. I mean, we've talked about it in the past on this show and on my radio show. It's a little different when you're a quarterback, where you're not getting hit on every play, than when you're a safety and you're propelling your body each and every play. I mean, there's a wear and tear on that back. The hope is that he'll be able to come back for training camp. Another guy that's injured that we didn't know until now, because they keep it very close to the vest, is John Jenkins. Had a great year last year, I thought, for a guy that was, kind of emerging as a young player. It's a pectoral muscle at this point. We've seen guys go out with pectoral muscles and be out an entire season.
Ray Lewis.
Okay. The question is this something that can linger?
Yeah, and is it, how torn is it, or is it torn? And the worst thing about Byrd and Jenkins is that this is the time of year you're getting stronger and lifting weights, and they can't be, you know, with those injuries. So those are both kind of tough. And this was going to be Jenkins' year to kind of take over that starting spot, I thought, and he still can. But again, that's something we'll have to keep an eye on in training camp, see how fast he's coming along.
Especially the position he plays, huh, Lenny?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's all about strength and leverage, and you know, it's one of those things too. This, like you said, second year, this had the potential to be a breakout year. And I like what I saw out of Jenkins as a rookie. So, you know, if he is delayed in coming back at all, or is out for some period of time, you know, it weakens you at a critical position. It kind of sets the tone for what you do as a defense.
Yeah, that's the only thing about both of those guys. So late in the game right now, when you're only, 6 weeks out from training camp, and guys are recovering from surgeries, that's a tough deal, especially for a guy like Bird, who hasn't played in this defense yet, who's going to be relied on to make a lot of calls on that back end.
It makes you wonder about Bird, too. How much did the Saints know about the injury when they signed him?
I don't know how you pass a physical. Honestly,
yeah.
I mean, you know, with a back injury like that, especially because, again, I think it was Mike Trippett that wrote about it when it first broke, that he left the Pro Bowl with a back injury. You know, how severe it was, we don't know, but you know, again, there should have been a red flag there immediately.
And were they given honest and good information from him and from his team, or at the time the Bills, right?
Right.
When they made the move.
Joe Morgan is a guy that hasn't got back on the field yet. He's in a fight for his life for a spot on this roster. He's coming off an ACL injury. I'm a little surprised that he's not back, but he's expected to be back for training camp. Lenny, what do you think?
I think they're probably just being cautious there, and you can do that, especially with guys that you know, and it'll give him more time to be able to come back. And they're probably, you know, who knows? They may be doing things with him in one-on-one situations, and you know, in situations where the doors are not open, that you know you're allowing him to do that. But I mean, you give him a few more weeks to be able to come back, and ideally he is 100% for training camp. But they know what they've got there, and what they've got is a deep threat. Now, with Brandon Cooks, who is a guy we have not seen yet during OTAs and during this mini camp because of his school schedule, he'll be back out on the field next week. You know, what does his ability as a deep threat receiver, how does that affect what Morgan's future is? I mean, you can always have those guys, but at the same time, you've got to have a good mesh in your receiving core, whether it's 5 deep or 6 deep, depending on how many guys you carry on your 53-man roster. You know, can you carry 2 guys that are deep threats?
Well, I think Brandon Cooks is going to. I think he's going to be an instant addition to the offense, and let's give him some credit for going to school. I mean, my goodness, nowadays the kids they don't go to school after December because they're at the combine and they're working out at camps. I mean, here he is still in school. That's just an oddity. That never happens.
That's an NFL rule, though. I mean, again, he cannot participate in any type of training.
But that's what I'm saying. Most of them don't enroll in class after that December semester.
Yeah. Ohio State's another school like that's on that quarter system. That again, when you draft somebody, they got to wait till you bring those guys in. So let's talk a little bit about the draft. We'll start with you first. What were your overall thoughts on how they did in this draft?
Well, I liked the first round pick we just spoke of, the wide receiver Cooks, and you know, I was looking for a center or a lineman, but you know, they don't like picking guys that high for the line. But I think he was an excellent pick. You know, covering LSU would have been more fun maybe to have Odell, but this guy he's put up more numbers than Odell. Of course, he didn't have Landry playing next to him, but I think he's going to be a very immediate impact on the offense. I really like that pick.
He's about as close as you can get to Odell Beckham without having Odell Beckham on this team. And again, the cost to be able to go up that high where the Giants were picking or in front of the Giants would have been prohibitive. Again, Cooks kind of landed right where they needed him to land in order for them to get him. Lenny, what are your thoughts? Brandon Cooks and beyond.
Yeah, certainly going up to get Cooks, I thought was a good pick. It cost you a 3 to be able to move up 7 spots, and you know they had the one extra pick in there. But you know what was interesting to me was the pick of Jean-Baptiste, the cornerback out of Nebraska in the 2nd round. Look at what has happened in the NFC South. You had Tampa Bay, Carolina both go out and get gigantic wide receivers. Atlanta's already got some big wide receivers. Everybody's trying to be like the Saints with Colston and Graham, I guess, and seeing what the Saints have been able to do offensively using big targets at wide receiver. Now you've got to go play against those guys 6 times a year. So going and getting a 6'3" cornerback, I thought was a critical move. And the reviews have been, I don't want to say mixed on Jean-Baptiste so far, but Sean Payton had some good things to say about him yesterday after the minicamp practice, saying that he likes his progression, how quickly he's picking things up. And that's, I think he's kind of the wild card in all of this and how he's going to figure into the defense.
Would it be fair to say that Fort, Sinceri, and Powell, kind of situational depth, also guys that again, will have to make their mark on special teams? I think the same can be said for Stanley Jean-Baptiste as well.
Well, I think that'd be a disappointment if Stanley Jean-Baptiste doesn't play more than special teams, just judging from how Sean spoke about him on draft day and comparing him to the Seahawks secondary players. So I think they need to get more out of him from special teams. But yeah, the rest, probably so. And
you've got some guys in those lower rounds that are coming back from injuries or have been injured previously and are still trying to make their way back to 100%. Although Sinceri has been a very quick recovery.
Real quick here.
Yeah,
huh?
what ACL in the Tennessee game, I think it was, the third Saturday of October, and he's back out there on the field. So that's a plus for him, if you will. But those types of guys. The one thing, especially when you're picking guys on defense in the lower rounds of the draft, those are guys that have to factor in on special teams if they're not going to somehow become starters. And a lot of times it's tough to break the starting lineup if you're not that high pick.
And that was a smart, calculated risk to go for Powell from Florida, because if he had not been hurt, he probably would have gone much higher. So they think, well, and people are coming back from injuries much quicker now, so he could end up being a lot more value than the round he was picked.
And you got some guys that are either in the last year, the second last year of their contracts, and again, that are playing that on that line, that ultimately he may have to be that pass rusher. That's just going to be the heir apparent for that position as well. Guys, any undrafted free agents that you think maybe have a real shot at making this team?
I like the running back out of Sam Houston. If for no other reason, look at the success that Mickey Loomis and this group has had with bringing in undrafted free agent running backs. You go all the way back to Pierre Thomas, forward, and it seems like they find that diamond in the rough, and he's a guy that seems to fit into that mold.
Right. Is that Timmy Flanders?
Right, Flanders, yeah.
And Cadet's another one, and Chris Ivory.
Chris Ivory, Kyrie Robinson, all guys, all undrafted free agents.
I'm real excited about watching Kyrie Robinson play this year.
Yeah, so am I. I think he's going to be the bell cow back for these guys this year. A lot of people have talked about Brandon Coleman. He's kind of had a hot and cold mini camp though at this point. Still feeling his way through.
Yeah, but again, you talk about those big receivers.
Yeah.
You can't teach size,
right?
And he's a guy who's 6'6" and can create a matchup problem out there. And if he's a guy who can excel, if you can find a way, with the depth that they have at wide receiver, and assuming everyone is still healthy, if he's a guy that you can get through and put him on the practice squad for a year, who knows? Maybe he's got a chance to turn into something.
Tulane fans have been emailing me about the progress of Ryan Griffin. Supposedly he's looked really sharp in minicamp and OTAs. Do you think this team would take a shot and go into the season with a Ryan Griffin backing up a Drew Brees? Is that a possibility?
I think so. And you see more times than not that you carry 2 quarterbacks these days. I think more teams do than don't, at least in terms of their 53-man roster. And I think you'd be taking a chance that if you went with a depth chart of Brees, McCown, Griffin, and tried to slip Griffin through to the practice squad again, which he would still be eligible for, that you're exposing him out there and you may not get him back. And if they really, truly think that he's got a chance to be that next guy down the road, Drew isn't getting any younger, he's 35, then you do that. Worst case scenario, if something happens to Drew and, knock on wood, he has stayed healthy for 8 years here, but if something would happen and he would be out for a game or 2 games, there are always veteran guys out there. They can bring in guys who have known their system or guys who haven't known their system, perhaps, that you can bring in that situation. But I think they like where Ryan Griffin is progressing. I think you got to keep both of them. It's just they're not going to. One of these years, Brees is going to miss some games. I hope it doesn't happen, but you got to almost plan for that insurance-wise. The Jimmy Graham grievance hearing is on June 17th and 18th. I've talked about it on this program on my radio show.
I'll be shocked if this gets to arbitrator Stephen Burbank, especially with the history Burbank has had with the Saints, from the Drew Brees tag situation to obviously ruling in favor of Goodell in the Bounty Camp and the Bountygate case. Lenny, what do you think happens there? Do you think that he's ultimately going to make the decision on whether Graham should be paid as a tight end or wide receiver, or there'll be an 11th hour contract agreement?
I think I'm with you. I think that a deal may get done here, and you need, deadlines are out there. Whether it's this deadline or it's the July 15th, I believe it is, that he would have to accept it or take a multi-year deal, or else he's got to play for the tag on a one-year deal. I think something's going to get done in one of those two time frames, and I think it's got a chance to happen. One thing that that the Saints are very good about is they're not out there negotiating in the public. They're going to do things very low key, and this may just suddenly pop up on Monday, perhaps, that a deal is done, and we're not going to an arbitrator in this situation. But there's obviously this is big, and we talked about this before we came on air this evening. This isn't just big for Jimmy Graham and for the Saints. This is big for the National Football League, because Jimmy Graham is not the only guy in the NFL who is a tight end on a roster, but is splitting out quite a bit. And he basically is playing three positions. He's playing an in-tight tight end, he's playing a slot receiver, and he's playing a wide receiver. Now, he hasn't played the majority of snaps at any one of those three spots. He's pretty spread out across those three areas. So, what do you define that slot guy as? Is that considered a wide receiver? Is that considered a tight end? Is it considered a hybrid? Whatever it is, that's what's to be determined. And, positions are positions. I know that about the comparable case that's come up here was with outside linebackers and hand on the ground defensive end in terms of how this works. And I believe that was with Terrell Suggs. That's about the only thing that's comparable to what we're dealing with here. But more and more, the way offenses are developing, I think this is big for the whole league, not just for Jimmy Graham and the Saints.
Go ahead.
I think he's not the first one. That's definitely true. I mean, heck, Rich Castor was a hybrid in the 70s. There's a few of them, but I just don't think you should be drastic and name a new position. Just bring the tight end overall money up a little bit more, because it's getting to be a much more popular position and key to offenses, and maybe bring the wide receiver money down a little bit. Same thing with defensive end and linebacker. But I'd hate to see him label another position. I mean, we're getting too specialized in all sports anyway. Plus, a lot of the reason Jimmy Graham is so good is because he's got a great quarterback and a great play caller, and when a good cornerback has covered him, he's played like a tight end. Well, and played like a hybrid.
And we've seen the war of words already starting between the NFL, between the NFLPA, back and forth now to try to kind of setting their ground here on what's going to happen if they get to that grievance hearing. Drew Brees made some comments that maybe taking a little bit out of context about Jimmy Graham. Ultimately it's the truth. I mean, if he's here, they're going to play with him. If he's not, they're going to move on. I mean, it's just the way it is in the NFL. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm still feeling that the NFL doesn't want this to go to an arbitrator, and neither do the Saints at this point. So I think a deal gets done maybe at the 11th hour.
I would tend to agree with that. I think it's some way it's going to happen for that. And if it doesn't get done and it ends up to an arbitrator, then who knows? Maybe it even happens during the course of that, or if it comes to that, then you may still get the long-term deal done by July 15th.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE TV. 6 o'clock live broadcast. On Fridays, we do a rebroadcast here on WLAE TV, 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. 866-3200 is the phone number. Great panel for you from SportsNola.com. Lenny Vangilder from Gannet News is also Glenn Guilbeau. My name is Eric Asher. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation, Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home, and Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't, because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's 1 every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is literally saving kids' lives.
It's a very special place, friendly place.
To see the kids that they're helping on a daily basis was unbelievable.
Families never receive a bill from St. Jude.
Discoveries made at St. Jude are freely shared.
The hardest cancer cases in the world go to St. Jude. We won't stop until no child dies from cancer.
Join us.
Join us
in supporting Hoops for St. Jude.
Visit stjude.org/hoops to find out how.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, along with Glenn Guilbeau of Gannet News and Lenny Vangilder of SportsNola.com. We'll shift gears in just a moment. We'll talk a little bit of college baseball. But, guys, let's talk a little bit about the loss of Super Bowl 52. Some have mused it was about the power outage. I've always said since this thing happened, this is about the fact that the NFL is going to reward cities that build stadiums. There's a new public-private partnership model between ownership and of course, the state and the cities to be able to build these new stadiums. And ultimately, guys, I'd like to get your take. Lenny, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the Super Bowl, why it did not come to the city? And will we see another Super Bowl in the Dome before the Saints leases up in 2015?
Or 2025.
I'm sorry, 2025.
Yeah,
sorry, 2025.
I think there's a chance of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think you're right. We undervalued in the city of New Orleans just how important the new stadium was. And Minneapolis building $1 billion stadium. It's going up as we speak. The Vikings are going to play 2 years on the University of Minnesota campus and then moving to a new stadium in 2016. And they've got themselves a Super Bowl coming to their city in January of 2018. Atlanta's going to have a new stadium, which they strategically, if you will, broke ground on while the NFL was meeting there in the course of in Atlanta during the course of picking this Super Bowl selection. That could be the site in 2019, perhaps. And you start figuring, down the road, okay, when is there an opportunity here? Miami is talking about, making a serious renovation of their stadium, which would almost kind of make it look like Jerry World a little bit from what I've seen. Jacksonville is making significant renovations to their
Putting
stadium.
a swimming pool in, huh?
How about that?
I don't care what stadium they build. That's a terrible place for a Super Bowl, Jacksonville. And that's what the NFL's forgetting. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, but New Orleans is still a great, great city to host these events. And I mean, you're talking about, one of the things that New Orleans tried to hang its hat on was the number of hotel rooms that are in downtown New Orleans, which, by the way, was more than Minneapolis and Indianapolis put together. You did not have the ability to keep all of these things within your triangular footprint that they had set up in the city of New Orleans, basically, warehouse district to the Superdome to the French Quarter, the triangle that they had established there. And you don't have that in many places. Minneapolis, Indianapolis, I've been to both places for events. It's a terrific town to host events, but it's not New Orleans. And I would think that the NFL realizes that, the owners will realize that at some point here in the not too distant future, we'll get another one.
Before the 2025 end of the lease?
I think it's got a chance. Now, obviously, you don't know what the whole stadium situation is going to be in some of these other places, but I think it's definitely got a better than average chance of happening.
How about the NFL's demands?
It's crazy. I mean, if you haven't seen the document, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune got a hold of, through a public records request, of the document that the NFL put as their bid specifications, and 150 pages or more of all these things spelled out on there. One of the hilarious things to me was they wanted free use of 2 high-quality bowling centers. Well, guess what? It might have been one. I'm not sure we have 2 left in New Orleans.
That's why we lost it.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. We only have 2. I mean, you leave out the Rockin' Bowls and the Fulton Alleys, which are not really, which are more bars and music establishments than they are bowling centers. And you've got 2. That's it. So that's all you've got left in New Orleans.
The NFL is just going overboard with what can you do for me to bring my Super Bowl to you? I mean, if Alaska built a stadium and built 2 bowling alleys, the Super Bowl would be in Alaska. It's like they're getting away from what's the best for their fans and really for their teams and for the overall experience. I mean, cities like New Orleans and Miami that are great Super Bowl sites, though Miami's a little too spread out. I mean, the veteran Super Bowl cities, they shouldn't have to build a new stadium to get one.
Right.
You know, I mean, in Indianapolis, that's the only reason they got it was because of a new stadium. And so they need to mix that up and go back to the cities that are really made for the Super Bowl. You ask any media person that covers it or teams and fans, and New Orleans is usually at the top of the list.
Well, and look, they're rolling the dice once again with going above the Mason-Dixon line, and eventually it's going to bite them. Now, it could be a whiteout in Minnesota that ultimately turns the tide, but you know they're on this road now where you build it, we're going to come, and again, that is that carrot and a stick for them to be able to get communities to be able to build stadiums. I think it's going to be interesting. I've said on this show and also my radio show, when this lease ends in 2025 with the Saints and the state, and there starts to be a talk of a new stadium, if that's going to happen, by that time, obviously, Mr. Benson probably won't be here, but whoever's going to be in charge of the Saints at that point, are they going to be willing to do a public-private partnership? Because right now, as I've mentioned, he's got the sweetest deal in the NFL.
Oh, yeah, and every new stadium construction I heard when they were talking about that years ago, Benson wasn't going to pay for any of it.
Right.
And I mean, look, can New Orleans pay for it? They can't get the lights turned on.
Well, we can't move City Hall into the old charity hospital, so that tells you something right there.
Yeah. The other thing too that I wonder how much of a factor it was is you talked about going north of the Mason-Dixon line. They really lucked out with the weather in New York.
Yes.
And had it been colder, snowing, those types of things, would that have just killed the chance of anybody north of the line being able to get one? But might it have turned it into a slam dunk for New Orleans this time around had it been 20 degrees instead of 45 on Super Bowl Sunday this year?
Right.
California Chrome loses the Belmont, loses a chance at the Triple Crown. Lenny, I'll start with you first. Some of the comments by the owners of California Chrome made a lot of people think. Some people thought it was sour grapes. Some people started thinking about, well, maybe there should be a moratorium on allowing horses to jump in the Preakness and the Belmont if they don't run all three. You're a guy that's been around horse racing for a long time. What are your thoughts?
Well, I keep this in mind, first of all. This is not, fans of horse racing, your casual fan maybe jumps in and watches these 3 races a year. Horse racing is a lot like boxing. Every state has their own jurisdiction, has their own rules and such, and all of these tracks are individually operated, although Churchill Downs owns the fairgrounds and a couple of other tracks, Arlington Park and Calder Racecourse in Miami. But still in all, everything is individually owned. It's not a league like the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball where everyone is, there is a loose association, but it's still all these people making their own rules. So if Pimlico Racecourse in Baltimore and, Belmont, New York, part of the New York Racing Association, if they decide they want to enact certain rules, well, they can enact certain rules. But the Triple Crown is a very loose umbrella between these 3 associations, and that's about all it is. The one thing, Brian Krantz wrote a guest blog on sportsnola.com earlier this week, the former president of the fairgrounds and somebody who has been intimately involved in all aspects, not just management, of the horse racing industry. And a great piece today by Randy Moss, the horse racing analyst, not the NFL wide receiver,
right.
Talking about spreading out the races. And while everybody thinks, make it easier because then you get the rest and things like that, it might just make it harder to win because now not just is the horse who won the Derby and maybe who won the Derby and the Preakness fresh, but so's everybody else. And now you may have more of these horses coming back. One of the things that was interesting is that the second place horse in the Kentucky Derby never sat out the Preakness for like a half century, but in the last 7 years, the runner-up has sat out 3 times. It's something you would not expect to happen. And it's, in the 2nd through 5th place finishers, 3 of the last 7 years have missed the Preakness. So they're not coming back. In 2 weeks, horses don't run that way anymore. How horses are run, how they're trained, they used to be just your training was running in races. If you went to the track back in the day, if you go every Saturday, a lot of times you see the same horses running every Saturday. It's not that way anymore. Maybe horses run once a month, and maybe the schedule needs to be changed to accommodate how horses are running these days.
How about the comments from ownership?
I don't think it was an awful thing to say necessarily. I mean, certainly he was frustrated, and he had expressed some of those things, certainly not on that platform leading up to the Belmont, but to stick a microphone in front of him 3-4 minutes after the race and having that, I don't think that was appropriate. He had the chance to apologize on Sunday, didn't do it then, finally apologized on Monday. While it's good that he did apologize for the comments because it wasn't good for the horse racing industry, and obviously if California Chrome would have won the Belmont, I've got a lot of friends still in the racing industry, it would have been huge for the industry. And this wasn't a good thing for the industry with up to 20 million people watching at that point. But at the end of the day, I think we'll get past that. Somebody's going to win a Triple Crown again, hopefully in our lifetime.
Glenn, LSU gets knocked out of their own regional, and a lot of people just really besides themselves on some of the decisions that were made down the stretch. What are your thoughts on the Tigers' season and what they have in the cupboard going forward?
Well, they had a very good season, and they were on their way to Omaha, top 8 seed. They won their first 2 games, and then combination of some bad luck and some bad pitching decisions by Coach Maneri, I think, led to them getting beat twice in a row by Houston. Don't disagree with the first night of pitching when they kept who was Kyle Bowman in. They took Kyle Bowman out. That's what they had been doing all year. The bullpen had been very good, but it was the next night that was really a killer. He pitched Brady Domingue in the 3rd inning. Brady hadn't pitched since May 4th.
Yes.
So he kind of probably should have gone with his best guys a little earlier than that. Maybe come back with Joe Broussard. I wrote that he ought to rethink his philosophy about not bringing back pitchers. Just tweak it a little bit. You can bring them back for a brief appearance, and I think if he'd have done that, he'd be hosting a 3-game. He either would have beat Texas or lost to them, and would be on the way to Omaha.
On the way to Omaha,
right?
It was interesting to me in that. First of all, I thought Texas has played great in the postseason. So even if they had won one of those 2 games against Houston, what I saw of Texas, I'm not sure LSU would have beaten Texas.
That would have been a great super, though.
That would have been outstanding. But to your, I think you nailed it in that you see guys, go to both ends of the spectrum in terms of how they're using pitchers. Houston brought back a guy who had thrown 90 pitches on Friday and had him throw 100 pitches on Monday, basically, or something close to those numbers. Right.
But he was kind of a funky change-up slider pitcher, not a lot of wear and tear on the arm, and also not drafted.
Sure. Right. But other teams didn't do that. Other teams took the Maneri philosophy, and then other teams were bringing guys back. UC Irvine, who's going to be in Omaha, threw their Friday starter back on 2 days rest against Oregon State in the championship game of the regional. Number 1 team beat the number 1 team in the country on their home field to get them out of there, and now they won their super regional. Now they're on the way to Omaha. So,
I thought what Coach Maneri should have done in the Monday game was bring Jared Poche back. Probably maybe to start the 3rd inning or at some point. Don't start him, or maybe not even bring him in relief because he's a starting pitcher. But Poche had pitched Friday afternoon. He had, it depends how you look at it. I mean, he had Friday night off. It was a Monday night game. He had all Saturday and Sunday off. He's a Bulldog. He could have gone a couple of innings. I could see not bringing Nola back.
Right.
But I think Poche could have helped you.
I agree. And I mean, the thing ideally what would have happened for the following weekend, assuming you advance, is Nola would have pitched the first game. So Poche wouldn't have been pitching until game 2. Right. So he would have had a little bit of extra time to rest in there.
Yes.
And I mean, he's a guy, look, you threw him 15, 20 pitches on a Tuesday, and it turned around and started him on a Thursday, the last week of the regular season, because he had missed a start when they had an SEC game running down. So it's, bringing him back, it would have been his bullpen day. You could have found a way to do that, and you knew you were going to be probably in a situation where you could be piecing it together. I agree. Now, granted, once it got out of hand there in the 3rd inning, maybe he was thinking about using him a little bit later. We'll never know.
No, he wasn't going to use him. He ruled him out before the game. But also, in defense of Coach Maneri, they had a very strange thing happen with Alden Cartwright. I mean, there's a guy that had started several SEC games late in the season. Right. He's used to that bright lights and everything. He goes out there, throws 2 strikes, and then 9 straight balls, and I've never seen that happen. Right. And so it's the first inning, and Maneri's entire plan is up in the air at that point. So that was just strange and bad luck, like I said.
And one other thing too, who knows that this trip to Omaha wasn't lost on LSU 2 years ago when Carson Baronick and Christian Trent left the program, and lo and behold, look who's starting Game 2 of the Super Regional in Lafayette. Baronick starting for UL Lafayette, and Trent is starting for Ole Miss, and both of those guys started their college careers at LSU. That might have been your number 2 and 3 starters.
That's a great point, Lenny. With that said, talk about what LSU looks like coming back. What are your thoughts on this program going forward, Glenn?
Well, I think Jared Poche is going to move right into that NOLA spot as the ace. I mean, he's probably not going to be as good as NOLA, but he did have a better freshman year than NOLA did. And, you know, Maneri is a lot like Les Miles. I mean, the talent just keeps coming in and going out. And, I mean, he's got Alex Bregman back. He's got Mark Laird back. He's got Andrew Stevenson back. They're going to have a pretty good team. I mean, they lost a lot of guys going into this year, and they still had a very good season. So I think they'll be right up there. And, you know, he had some injured pitchers in addition to those pitchers where he just didn't have room for. One of them was a disciplinary move. And you got to give Maneri credit for that. You know, a lot of coaches give 2 or 3 strikes. Man, you mess up just about once for Maneri and you're gone. But I think they're going to be fine. I think they'll be in about the same situation they were this past season.
Lenny, anything you get at?
We won't know for sure until the deadline for draft signees comes in mid-July, but it seems, at least now, that they're going to fare pretty well in the draft. They may lose just one guy.
This is the best they would have ever fared.
Right. And Mac Marshall, the left-hander out of Georgia, who would have, in theory, you know, if he ended up getting drafted by the Astros, but would have, in theory, been a much higher pick if he would have said he was going to make himself available, is going to end up on campus. And Greg Dykman from Brother Martin is going to end up on campus as well.
Yeah, he's going to get about 9 or 10 of his signees stay, and that would be a record for him because he's lost a bunch.
Let's head to the phone lines. 504-866-3200. Eugene, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
When they come back, I'll be there. All right, thanks a lot.
Eugene, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you. Hello, Eric.
How you doing, Eugene?
Nice show.
Thank you.
And I want to peel back to the horse racing issue.
Okay.
And you know, I had horses in the late 80s and early 90s. And I could see, and I kind of agree with Chrome's owner. And I'll tell you this. No, horse racing is not like the NFL. It's more like boxing. Everybody's out for themselves. Now, if California Chrome wins the Kentucky Derby, wins the Preakness, what if it hates? Man, major upheaval. But they let everybody in for the Belmont Stakes who didn't run the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness. And I don't think that's unfair. And I think he was right. And I'm going to hang up and listen.
Eugene, thank you for the phone call. Lenny, what do you think?
Well, again, you know, you're dealing with a lot. You know, there's not 32 owners. There's literally tens of thousands of owners of racehorses out there. I mean, you start in January when horses are nominated for the Triple Crown. There's usually 500 or 600 3-year-olds that get nominated. 20 of them make the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby. You know, you end up with fewer than that in the Preakness, sometimes fewer than that in the Belmont, around the same amount. But you know, they're not going to allow more than 14 in those races. So it's it's really the first time that I've heard this argument that Steve Coburn made that if you don't run it all, you know, you don't run in the Derby, you don't run in these. The reason Tonalist didn't run is because Tonalist wasn't healthy. You know, should that rule him out? It's not like you go on injured reserve and you're out for the whole season. It doesn't work that way. So, you know, you can't fault the connections of Tonalist for running. They did what was allowed by the rules, and like I say, the Triple Crown is just a very loose umbrella of these 3 associations to allow you to nominate your horse, you know, one time to be able to run in all 3 of these races, and I don't see that part of it ending up changing in the long run.
Thank you for the phone call, Eugene. David Pierce is the new baseball coach at Tulane. You had a chance to talk to him today. Lenny, your impressions?
I'm impressed, and the one thing we came away with in visiting with him, I should say 2 things. One, he's fairly soft-spoken. He's not I'll stop short of saying dynamic, but he's a baseball guy. You know, and he's bringing his entire staff with him from Sam Houston State, and he's been successful there, and he's been successful as an assistant coach previously, most notably at Rice, where they won a national championship. And so he understands how you have to do things at a high academic institution where you're trying to deal with managing those 11.7 scholarships the NCAA allows in baseball and spread them across a 35-man roster, and the nuances that you have to deal with there. But one of the things that we were talking about afterwards is the fact that, look at the resume that he has. When is the last time Tulane hired a coach with a resume, in any sport, with a resume like that?
What about helping the coach get the program back to where Rick Jones had it? 11.7 scholarships, inability to use tops, an enormous amount of money. What is it, like $60,000 to go to Tulane for the year? What is the administration going to do to help Pierce be successful?
Well, I think you've got to be able to get the young men that are out there that are eligible for academic aid and get them some of that aid out there. You've got some fairly smart baseball players, and that's the ones that the Tulanes, the Rices, the Stanfords, the Vanderbilts, the Miamis, the Georgia Techs of the world, Notre Dames, you want to throw them in there because they've been good previously. Those types of schools are all recruiting those same types of players, and you've got to be able to get those types of players in on academic aid as opposed to athletic aid. That's how you can stretch that 11.7, where the state schools can use tops to be able to do that. The academic aid that Tulane does have out there, and really the only sport that comes into play on a college campus, at least on Tulane's campus, is baseball. The other major sports are all what you call counter sports. You have full scholarship, and you can have that many number of kids on scholarship. Baseball is a different animal.
Does Tulane still, do they have the congressional scholarship, I think it was called? Or
the legislative scholarship is still there. Basically what you do is you apply for it, and then the legislators make their picks based off of the pool of applicants.
Yes.
So they can apply for those.
Yeah, sure they could.
But that only turns into a couple of players, though.
Perhaps, but again, those are only the only people eligible for legislative scholarship are young men and women who reside in the state of Louisiana. So if you're going to recruit out of state, that goes out of play.
And I don't even think you have to reside in the district of the legislator. It can be anywhere in the state of Louisiana that you can receive the scholarship. Back to the phone lines we go. Ronnie, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, it's Ronnie from St. Bernard.
Ronnie, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Great, quick question for the panel there. First of all, Glenn, you look really good. I hadn't seen the way you look in person, but you look good. But you guys are sharp. Hey, real quick, I wanted to ask about the opening game. Like last year, the opening teams came in, the Falcons came in, and they came in with a better record, but the Saints beat them at home. Do you think the Falcons might have the edge? Because they're going back to Atlanta, and they had the bad year just like the Saints did the year before, and I'm a little worried. I'm worried that the season might not start off like I want it to.
Ronnie, thank you for the phone call. Glenn, since he thought your tie was incredible and you were looking so good, why don't you take it first?
The Saints open at Atlanta?
At Atlanta.
Well, that's, Atlanta's going to be on the HBO show Hard Knocks. So the Saints can study that, so there's an advantage. But
not like they don't know everything Atlanta's doing already.
Well, that's a difficult first game for sure. But the Saints have kind of owned Atlanta in recent years, so that game doesn't concern me that much. And you look at the Saints' road woes. They won early on the road last year, and I think they'll be fine in Atlanta.
I think that 2-game start on the road this year is really critical. It's the first time, since 2006, the Saints are opening with back-to-back games on the road. You don't want to be 0-2, certainly. And the thing about Atlanta is, obviously a division game. A game's like a game and a half.
Yes.
It's valued that much more. So. But I think certainly you have to be able to get home for the home opener against Minnesota. If you're not 2-0, at worst you've got to be 1-1.
Right. I would agree. Thanks for the call from the parish, Ronnie. Appreciate it.
And I think there's advantage Saints there with Peyton preparing for the opener all off season.
Right. And they know this team. And there'll be no surprises with the Atlanta Falcons. Glenn, Lenny, ULL. We're on in Lafayette each and every Friday night. Your thoughts on the ULL program and how they're heartbroken. They're not in Omaha, but you got to give kudos to what they've been able to do in Lafayette.
Well, it was eerie that the same thing almost happened to ULL in the Super as happened to LSU in the regional. They won the first game of the Super by 4 runs, handily, great pitching. and then they lost a game they could have won in the second game, and then they got blown out in the third game, and they kind of ran out of pitching. And Tony Robichaux also didn't bring his pitchers back, including his son, Austin. But I think ULL had a great season. I mean, from wire to wire, they were the best team in Louisiana. They were ranked #1 throughout the season. They went into postseason as #1. They beat Alabama 2 out of 3. They beat LSU. They beat Mississippi State 2 in a row. They beat Ole Miss once. But just a very good team, a very balanced team. They returned almost their whole batting order. And they were a lot of fun to watch. And really, I give them a lot of credit. After they lose 1-0 to Jackson State in the opener of their regional, the first time they're a national seed, really kind of an embarrassing loss. And I say embarrassing because usually that happens to the big schools, and that's where they are. But they came back from that and went through the losers bracket and, came within just a couple of runs from getting to Omaha. So a great season for ULL for sure.
And the program in good shape.
Oh, no question. They actually, Robichaux might come back and pitch for him next year. They're going to have a decent team next year. I don't think it quite as good all year and ranked as high, but they should be right in there this season.
Lenny, what can you add?
Next season.
They lose a lot. There was primarily a junior and senior lineup, and some of those juniors were drafted. So they will lose a lot.
But not all of them high enough where they're definitely going to go.
Could be. I mean, the one guy who's going to be a high draft pick next year is the shortstop, Trahan. He was a sophomore, be a junior next year. Some people are talking he could be a first-round pick in 2015. The one thing I would say about UL Lafayette is this. Throw out any year that LSU has ever had, and that may be the best year ever, all around, by a program in the state of Louisiana. And I worked at UL Lafayette, I worked at Tulane, I've worked at UNO, been witness to what's been going on in the state for a long time. But look, winning a bowl game, going to the NCAA tournament in basketball, going to the Women's College World Series, being a national seed in baseball, they were the only program in the country to get to the super regionals in baseball and softball. That's
just
pretty
a couple of wins away from setting the NCAA record for wins for a baseball team
in the modern era, right? So it's
plus their facilities. I mean, you got to give credit for what they've done with private money at Lafayette. They're building SEC type facilities there as well.
Big indoor facility. A lot of SEC schools would like to have what they have for an indoor facility. They're in the process of taking one of those end zones at Cajun Field, putting in seats there. It's going to get the seating capacity up close to 40,000. They really need to expand some things on the baseball side. The grandstand area hasn't changed since I worked there 25 years ago, basically. So
the baseball program deserves a bigger stadium. But what's really cool about UL, if you want to call them the University of Louisiana, really of all the schools in Louisiana, if you look at it culturally, they really should be called the University of Louisiana in a way, because Lafayette is more Louisiana than Baton Rouge is, I think. Lafayette's a little closer to New Orleans in food, music, and so forth, the South Louisiana kingpin. And almost all their kids are from Louisiana. Right. And LSU still has a lot of kids from Louisiana, but they're a national program, so naturally they can go out and get those kids. But it's, ULL's got a kid from Kinder. They got players from Slidell, Crowley, a lot of kids from Lafayette. You really feel like you're watching a Louisiana team.
Well, guys, that's it. Thanks so much for being with us here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Lenny Vangilder of SportsNola.com, also Glenn Guilbeau of Gannet News. Really appreciate you guys being part of the panel. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this show each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 o'clock. Also on Pelican Sports Television in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. You can also catch me on the radio weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on 990 a.m. WGSO, and also on the web at ericasher.com. If you've missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can catch those at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to our guests, Lenny Vangilder of SportsNola.com and Glenn Guilbeau of Gannet News. Also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Chad Dosher, Kenny Juneau, William Hill, and Naila Jones as well. For Lenny Vangilder, for Glenn Guilbeau, I'll get through it. My name is Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you right back here for Inside New Orleans Sports next week. Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation, Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home, and Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House.